Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. He's a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, and it's good to have you on the show this morning. Want to talk about your Republican counterparts. Are Democrats and Republicans unified behind the president when it comes to supporting Ukraine?
Listen, I'm very glad that we were able to pass a budget last week that included substantial assistance, $14 billion for Ukraine. As Deputy Secretary Sherman mentioned, this week we're going to be able to resupply the Ukrainian military with significant weaponry, for the first time drones that will allow them to take out some of these Russian convoys still stalled outside of Kyiv, and humanitarian assistance. But let's be honest, that bill passed last week in Congress, even though the majority of Republicans voted against it. Almost every single House Republican voted against it, and the majority of Republicans in the Senate voted against it. And so I do draw issue with my Republican colleagues who stand up in press conferences and criticize, eviscerate the president for his handling of the war, and then come down to the Senate floor and vote against these measures. So I'm glad that we do have a working majority to support Ukraine in the Senate, but it is made up of all Democrats, and right now only a handful of Republicans.
One senator, you pointed this out yesterday on Twitter about the senators who criticized the president on Ukraine, but also who voted against the $1.5 trillion omnibus bill that included Ukraine aid. Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska, one of those lawmakers, called out, who we had on the show yesterday morning, took offense to the tweet. Here is some of the lengthy exchange you had with him on the Senate floor yesterday.
Republicans very often are not willing to cast their vote in a way that is aligned with their voice. I see a fundamental inconsistency in criticizing an administration for not doing enough, but then not being willing to cast a vote to get aid to the people of Ukraine.
So let me just see if I understand what you just said. So 0.8% of the bill that was passed in the middle of the night last week is about Ukrainian aid. Do you believe that the people who voted against it because they were against Ukrainian aid? I think you know that not a person who voted against it, the Omni, voted against it because of the Ukrainian aid. So I think it's a dishonest argument. But the real thing we're talking about is grandstanding, because there's not a person on earth who's persuaded by that kind of tweet. You didn't move anybody. You're doing fan service for a subset of people who like Chris Murphy. I get why some people would like things that you stand for and advocate for. I get it. But there's not a person who disagreed with you who's moved because of a tweet like that. There's not an uninformed American who became informed. But there is a subset of the people who already like you that you got to grandstand for. That's all that happened with that tweet. The Republic got dumber because of that tweet. Nobody learned anything.
Despite, actually I think he lifted that line from old school. But despite that fact, the conversation ended cordially. You all both understood you were on the same side. I do want to ask, though, you feel free to respond, obviously, to the senator here if you wish. But also, though, Mika and I were talking earlier this morning about how concerned we were about a few Republicans in the Senate, especially, whose names we're not going to mention, because we don't want to dignify what they're saying, who seem to be trying to push Joe Biden into World War III and suggesting if he doesn't take steps that trigger World War III, that somehow he's weak and he's responsible for Vladimir Putin's invasion.
Well, I mean, listen, Senator Sasse believes that he should be immune from criticism for voting against Ukraine aid on the floor of the Senate. I take him at his word. He supported that provision of the bill. But there were plenty of provisions of that budget that I disagreed with. I just thought that the aid to Ukraine was so important that I set aside my reservations about other parts of that budget, and I cast a yes vote. Senator Sasse made a different decision. He did not think that the provisions for Ukraine were substantial enough to overcome his objections to other parts of the budget, and he voted no. And had the majority of senators taken his position, Ukraine would not have the aid that we are sending them right now. People would be dying. And I'm sorry, but that is a legitimate criticism to make of Republicans. And as to the idea that I wasn't moving the American public with that tweet, well, Senator Sasse was at a press conference the day before in which Ted Cruz said that Joe Biden alone was responsible for the invasion of Ukraine. How is that press conference that he attended legitimate political dialogue, but my criticism of Republicans for voting against Ukraine aid, political hackery? It's a double standard that I don't think we should accept, because we need a coalition of Republicans and Democrats on the floor of the Senate who are not just willing to speak in favor of Ukraine aid, but are actually willing to vote in favor of Ukraine aid, because this won't be the end. We will again later this year have to supply more weapons, more humanitarian aid, and we're going to need Republican support with their votes.
Yeah. So you know what? Because we're starting to mention Republican senators and a couple are getting into the mix, I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you that Meek and I were. It was Rick Scott who Meek and I were disgusted by last night. His words suggesting that Joe Biden has no heart for the people that are dying over there if he doesn't implement a no-fly zone that no military man or woman, no diplomat thinks is a safe thing to do right now. But I'm just curious what you think about people like Rick Scott that are out there saying that Joe Biden is responsible for Vladimir Putin killing people, that the American I mean, this reminds me of Republicans in every single poll I read before this invasion that said they had a higher approval rating for Vladimir Putin than Joe Biden. How do these people come to these conclusions?
I mean, it speaks to a larger infection in the Republican Party today, where power and the accumulation of power matters more than the peaceful transition of power. We saw that on January 6th in the aftermath, and winning wars overseas. I still think that infection hasn't grown to the point where the entire Republican Party has the disease. And Senator Sasse, to his credit, at the end of our exchange yesterday, criticized some of his fellow Republicans for those kind of over-the-top comments. But Senator Scott and Senator Cruz and Senator Hawley, they've been down on the Senate floor all year blocking President Biden's national security nominees. The very people that will help Wendy Sherman implement a policy to protect Ukraine aren't in jobs today because a small subset of Senate Republicans, not Senator Sasse, but Senator Scott and Senator Cruz and others, have stopped those people from getting on the job, which makes their criticism of President Biden even hollower.
Yeah, and so Rick Scott was saying that if Joe Biden didn't do things that every military leader in the Pentagon says will start World War III, that he is heartless and ignorant of the deaths of Ukrainian women and children. You have Josh Hawley also, again, like so many Putin apologists, blaming Joe Biden for this war instead of Vladimir Putin. So we've talked about that. We've talked about the exceptions to the rule. Let's step back a little bit and celebrate the fact that for the first time in quite some time. And by the way, let me just say also, we're very critical of Lindsey Graham. Lindsey has come out at times and been critical also of Republicans that have said some things and voted actually for the omnibus bill. But let's take a step back. Can you just tell Americans that are watching right now how, for the most part, Republicans and Democrats are working together to defend the people of Ukraine and defend something bigger, Western democracy?
Well, listen, this obviously is a moment in which all Americans, Republicans and Democrats, can stop taking our own democracy for granted. I mean, we're watching these heroic Ukrainians fight and die. We're watching President Zelensky essentially, put his life at risk every single day by staying in Kyiv for democracy. And in this country, we sometimes take it for granted. It's interesting. The last couple of weeks have been incredibly productive weeks in the United States Senate. It's not just the passage of that bill with Republican support for Ukraine, but we also passed some other pretty significant pieces of legislation, an anti-lynching bill that's been stalled for 50 years, reform of the Postal Service to make sure that we all get our mail for the next 20 years. All of a sudden, the United States Senate is becoming more functional. Republicans and Democrats are working together, and I think that's in part because there is a bit of a newfound appreciation for what we have and an unwillingness to waste it, because we're watching another country essentially have their democracy blasted out from under their feet. So, yes, I am critical of some Republicans who are saying one thing and doing another, but there is plenty of other Republicans who are coming together to support Ukraine and coming together to make democracy work in a way over the last couple weeks that it hasn't worked in a while in the United States Senate. That's a good thing.
Senator Murphy, good morning. One more for you.
Go ahead.
Senator Murphy, it's Jonathan Lemire. You're, of course, on the Foreign Relations Committee. And in less than an hour, only about 45 minutes or so from now, President Biden is going to speak to his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, to try to push him away from Moscow and further isolate Putin and his war machine. I want to get your assessment as to what would be, they say, as Jen Psaki, to use Jen Psaki's phrase in the briefing room yesterday, the carrots and the stick that could be offered here for Xi Jinping. What are the consequences the U.S. could threaten China with? But also, what are some incentives that perhaps Biden could offer to get Xi Jinping's help? Do they include the Trump-era tariffs?
So I think that the facts may speak for themselves here. Russia is going to be increasingly economically isolated, and there's just going to be a choice to be made for China and every other nation, whether over the next decade you want to be on the Russian side or whether you want to be on the side of those that are standing up for human rights and dignity and the preservation of human life. I think that integration with the Russian economy is a dead end for China, because I don't think that we are going to see the end of Russian sanctions. I think as they continue to engage in war crimes, the entirety of the West is going to sanction more and more companies that do business with Russia. And so that will mean that the Chinese, if they integrate more deeply with Russia, if they do weapons supplies, are going to find themselves subject to some of those sanctions. So Wendy Sherman made, I think, a very good moral case for why China needs to be take a firm line against this Russian invasion of Ukraine. But I think there's also a very clear economic case that it's bad for China if it ultimately sends a signal that it's going to be with Russia rather than with the rest of the world. China is much more integrated with the rest of the world's economy than Russia was, and so the effect of economic sanctions on China are much more significant than they are on Russia.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.